So a common question that I get is, what is the best hamster species for a first-time hamster owner? So I wanted to talk about that in today's video. If we're being completely honest here, I don't actually really believe there is a perfect species for a first-time hamster owner. But if you ask a lot of people, they're probably going to say that the Syrian hamster is the best species for a first-time hamster owner. And I actually kind of disagree with this. So to start, there are 5 species of hamster. There is the Syrian hamster, the Chinese hamster, the Roborovsky dwarf, the winter white dwarf, as well as the Campbell's dwarf. Many people will recommend the Syrian hamster as a first-time hamster because they are the biggest species, so that makes them easier to handle and easier to tame, and a lot of people say they're more friendly towards humans. But this isn't always the case with every single Syrian hamster. You have to keep in mind that every single hamster, no matter the species, they're going to have their own individual personality, just like any dog, just like any human. They're not all going to be the same. They're not all made in a factory like robots, so they're all going to be a little bit different. Some Syrian hamsters will not be easy to tame, some will be aggressive, and some may not be calm, some may have a ton of energy. So it's not always the case of, yeah, Syrians are going to be the easiest to tame. It's not always the case. Another reason that I wouldn't exactly recommend a Syrian for a first-time hamster owner is that they tend to be a hard species to please. Now when I talk about this, I mean that they never seem to completely be happy with what you give them. A lot of people often come to me and they say, hey, I'm giving my Syrian like a really large cage, I've given them this, this, and this. I've tried everything. They still are not happy. They still try to continuously try and escape, bar chew, cage pace, no matter how large the cage is. So this kind of should go to show you that Syrian hamsters really do need large enclosures, and for a lot of people, they need so much more than just the bare minimum. And if you can't provide something that's maybe at least 800 square inches of floor space, or you can't continue to keep upgrading their enclosure until they actually are happy, you may end up stressed because your Syrian hamster may not be happy with what you're able to provide, and then it's just not a good situation because you're stressed, because your hamster is stressed, because they seem to be very hard to please. Now it probably sounds like I have something against Syrian hamsters. I don't. They actually are my favorite species of hamster for my own personal reasons. But this is just the reality of them, and a lot are very, very hard to please. So if you really don't have the space and you don't have the means to be able to give them more and more because they always seem to want more, I probably wouldn't suggest one as a first-time hamster. The next species we have is the Chinese hamster. Now this is the only species I have not gotten to personally own, and I hate it. I would love to own a Chinese hamster, but they just aren't available in my area at all. I've literally never even seen a Chinese hamster in person, so it kind of hurts my heart. But from other people's experiences, I have heard that they tend to be a little bit more shy / timid, but of course, once again, it really comes down to their individual personality. The next species we have is the Roborovsky dwarf. Now this species is going to be your least recommended for first-time hamster owners. Many people say because they are the small species, they are going to be way too hard to tame, or not friendly towards humans, or way too energetic, which I don't necessarily agree with that. I don't think that a Robo can't be for a first-time hamster owner. Robos do have a lot of energy and they can be a little bit harder to tame or handle, but once again, not the case for every single Roborovsky. You can get a friendly Robo. It also may just take a little bit more time and patience to actually tame them. I believe that Robos are a lot less friendly than Syrians because Roborovskys have not been domesticated nearly as long as the Syrian species. So Syrians obviously have been around humans for a lot longer than the Robo has. So that kind of would explain why a Robo is a lot more timid and skittish than a Syrian hamster may be. Surprisingly, robos can be tamed with just a little bit of patience and time. So if you are someone who's really wanting a robo as your first hamster, then you kind of just have to keep in mind it may take a little bit more patience, it may take a little bit more time, and you might not end up having a super cuddly hamster who's going to sit on your hand and want to cuddle with you. They probably will want to run around a lot more, but it shouldn't discourage you from wanting to own one as long as you keep those things in mind. And the last two species we have, I'm going to actually lump these two together, and that is the winter white dwarf and the Campbell's dwarf. And unfortunately, these two species are the only two species that can interbreed with each other. And then unfortunately someone did that, and ever since then we now have hybrids, which are all over the world, and it's very uncommon to find a purebred winter white or a purebred Campbell's dwarf, because most of the time they're all hybrids. These two species oftentimes get a really bad rap. A lot of people will say they are mean and aggressive and they only want to bite you. But I really think the people who say that have just had a bad experience with dwarf hamsters, which is fine. You can have a bad experience with anything, but that doesn't make the entire species like that. I myself have actually found it easier to tame my dwarf hamsters than it has to tame my Syrian hamsters, and in fact I've actually been bitten less by dwarfs than I have been by Syrians. So you can actually end up with a very sweet dwarf hamster who is going to be fairly easy to tame and fairly calm. They're not always energetic. Some will be pleased to just sit in your hand and groom themselves and eat treats from your hand. So in conclusion, what you should take from this video is that every single hamster is going to have their own individual personality, and that is what matters most, not the species. So when you're looking into getting your first hamster, I suggest looking at all the species and going with which one you're most drawn to, and then go and visit some and actually interact with them and pick them up and see what their personalities are going to be like. One thing that you should always remember is if you see a hamster on Instagram and you see them being super friendly and cuddly and affectionate, please keep in mind not every hamster is like that. Because if you think that certain species is going to be like that, you are going to end up disappointed when they don't act like that. Some hamsters are way friendlier than others. Some will very much enjoy human interaction, and some just won't. And you can't really tell that until you kind of bring them home and tame them and bond with them. So please keep that in mind. So I know this video probably didn't answer your question, because there's no right or wrong answer for this question. It depends on the hamster. So I hope this video has maybe helped you narrow down what species you'd like to own as your first hamster. So yeah guys, thank you for watching. Bye!